Next on the news, Pope Leo XIV has his first conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and is invited to visit the country torn apart by war with Russia. The Holy Father prays at the tomb of Pope Francis and makes a surprise visit to a small town on the outskirts of Rome. The Vatican is hosting the Jubilee of Eastern Catholic churches, where the faithful are taking part in a series of divine liturgies.
He was a very good student. He was an A student.
Plus, we'll talk to the nun who taught the Pope how to understand the Bible and helped shape him into the man he is today. I'm Christine Persichetti. Currents News starts right now. Pope Leo XIV has been invited to make an apostolic journey to Ukraine. The country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, issued the invitation to the Holy Father during a phone call on Sunday. This after the pontiff appealed for peace in the war-torn country in his first public address.
Porto nel mio cuore le sofferenze dell'amato popolo ucraino.
Pope Leo XIV beginning his pontificate with calls for peace in Ukraine. Soon after, the Holy Father and President Volodymyr Zelensky had their first phone call, details of which Zelensky posted on social media. It was our first conversation, but already a very warm and truly substantive one. I thanked His Holiness for his support of Ukraine and all our people. We deeply value his words about the need to achieve a just and lasting peace for our country and the release of prisoners. The two leaders also discussed the issue of the Ukrainian children deported to Russia, a mission entrusted to Cardinal Zuppi by Pope Francis, and it remains to be seen how Pope Leo XIV will continue this work. It is clear, however, that peace in Ukraine is one of the new Pope's priorities. Here's more of what he said in his first Regina Coeli message on Sunday.
Si faccia il possibile per giungere al più presto a una pace autentica, giusta e duratura. Siano liberati tutti I prigionieri e I bambini possano tornare alle proprie famiglie.
Zelensky says he reaffirmed Ukraine's readiness for further negotiations to end the war with Russia, and he noted that an apostolic visit from Pope Leo would bring hope to the entire Ukrainian population. Cardinal Michael Czerny was part of the conclave that elected the first American-born pope, but he says many cardinals think of Pope Leo XIV as a pope from the Americas.
The criterion of nationality, race, color really has nothing to do with the selection and election of the Holy Father. And secondly, if I may change what you said slightly, we don't think of him so much as an American pope, we think of him as a pope from the Americas. And that's not the same. The people of Peru, and especially of his diocese of Chiclayo, are just as happy, and that doesn't take anything away from the joy in the United States or the joy here in Rome or throughout the world. But I really like to think of him as our new pope from the Americas.
Cardinal Czerny also said that the cardinals are very happy with how the conclave turned out, adding, "We firmly believe that God guided us in our choice, and we are very happy to have a wonderful pope at the head of the church again." The Vatican has released the schedule of Pope Leo's liturgical celebrations for the month of May. First on his agenda, Sunday, May 18th, the Holy Father will preside over the Mass of Inauguration in St. Peter's Square. On Tuesday, the 20th, the Pope will make a pilgrimage to the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, where he will visit the tomb of St. Paul. The following Sunday, on the 25th, the Pontiff will preside over a Eucharistic celebration at the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran. The Mass will include the formal installation of the Pope on the Cathedra Romana, the Episcopal See of the Bishop of Rome. Later that evening, the Pope will visit the Basilica of St. Mary Major, where he will venerate the revered icon of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Finally, on Saturday, the 31st, the feast of the Visitation of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Pope Leo will preside over Mass with priestly ordination in St. Peter's Basilica. The Vatican is hosting the Jubilee of Eastern Catholic churches this week. The faithful are taking part in a series of divine liturgies. A liturgy in the Ethiopian rite was celebrated on Monday in St. Peter's Basilica, led by the churches of Ethiopia and Eritrea. The Armenian church celebrated in the Basilica of St. Mary Major, where the Coptic liturgy was also held. On Tuesday, the celebrations returned to St. Peter's with the East Syriac Rite. St. Mary Major hosts Vespers organized by the Syriac Catholic Church, the Maronite Church, and the Syro-Malankara Church. On Wednesday, the final day of the Jubilee pilgrimage, there will be an audience with Pope Leo, followed by a return to St. Peter's for a divine liturgy in the Byzantine Rite. President Donald Trump is in the Middle East for a 4-day tour. Air Force One touched down in Saudi Arabia early Tuesday morning for Trump's first international trip of his second term. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman greeted him as he arrived. Bin Salman has emerged as a key Trump ally. He was among the first world leaders to congratulate him after his swearing in. The prince has been involved in the U.S. effort to mediate a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Later this week, Trump will head to Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth are traveling with him. The last known living American hostage in Gaza is now a free man. On Monday, 21-year-old Edon Alexander was released and handed over to the Red Cross. He was taken to an Israeli military base for a medical assessment and was reunited with his family. Alexander was held for 18 months after Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, 2023. Hamas announced Sunday night it would release Alexander following several days of talks with the U.S. Israel was not included in the talks, which were part of an effort to reach a ceasefire deal and resume humanitarian aid to Gaza. Pope Leo made a surprise visit to a small town on the outskirts of Rome. It was an unofficial and unscheduled trip, and the crowds there to see him were jubilant. He prayed at the shrine of Our Lady of Good Counsel, run by the Augustinians. When he was still Cardinal Prevost, he used to go there to pray before the image of the Virgin Mary. After he was elected as the prior of his order in 2001, he visited the shrine. During this visit, he was accompanied by fellow Augustinian friars and his brother, who just arrived from the U.S. When he left the shrine, he gave his blessing to those gathered. The faithful were filled with joy to see the Holy Father at his next stop at St. Mary Major. The Pope waved to the faithful, stopping to speak with a woman in a wheelchair and bless her. Next, he spotted an Argentinian Cardinal Sixto Rossi in the crowd and shook his hand. Pope Leo then entered the chapel of the Patroness of Rome, placing a bouquet of flowers and spending time praying before the icon of Mary. Next, he visited the tomb of Pope Francis, where he left a white rose and knelt to pray. And on the feast day of Our Lady of Fatima, a black minivan carrying the Holy Father arrived at Via Paulo VI for a private visit with his religious family. Pope Leo called this place home for a dozen years, from 2001 to 2013, while serving as prior general. He celebrated Mass with his Augustinian brothers and then joined them for lunch. It's a moment that's still sinking in for many, especially for those who knew him before he became the first American pope. But for a Wisconsin nun learning Robert Prevost, once a student of hers, was elected pope, it was nothing short of surreal. Currents News' Jenna McDermott has the story.
I was overwhelmed by an emotion I can't even describe. I mean, it didn't seem real.
That's how Sister Diane Brigant describes the moment she and the world learned the man she's known as Robert Bob Prevost was introduced as Pope Leo XIV.
I taught the Pope how to understand the Bible. You don't figure that's going to be part of your life. It sounds so strange, you know, but I did.
It was during the 1978-79 school year at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago where Sister Diane first met the man she called Bob. The young 20-something seminarian took Brigant's Intro to the Old Testament class his first year at the school and subsequent classes after that.
He was a very good student. He was an A student. And he was always on time, you know, which means he's reliable.
Brigant, who taught at CTU for 45 years, says it was about a decade ago when she last saw her friend during an ordination for another priest in Chicago. She sent her friend Bob an email a couple of years ago after he was made a cardinal. not to congratulate him, but to thank him for the kind of ministry that brought him to the attention of the Holy Father. Now that he's the Holy Father, Brigant believes Pope Leo will continue serving like he always has, including as a missionary in Peru.
He's 20 years with the poor in a foreign country, so committed to them, he becomes a national, a citizen. And you don't turn that off. First of all, it's got to be there for you to stay there for 20 years. So he's got that kind of a commitment. And that he names himself after Leo XIII, who was the champion of the working class.
While he's the first American to be elected pope, Brigant says Pope Leo is fair and he will not show any favoritism to his home country because he understands the real reason for his latest mission.
His responsibility is bigger than the United States. Maybe in his heart, that's his country. But he realizes his heart's got to be bigger.
Sister Diane Brigant will not travel to Pope Leo's installation, but she says officials with Catholic Theological Union will be there for the ceremony. Jenna McDermott, Currents News.
Great story. There was some fierce competition, but we now know the winners of the tablet's Easter art contest. At least 150 students from across Brooklyn and Queens submitted their artwork showcasing their creativity while celebrating the true meaning of Easter. The paper was able to narrow it down to 10 winners and 8 honorable mentions. Some schools took home multiple awards, like Our Lady of Mercy Catholic Academy in Forest Hills, Belle Harbor's St. Francis de Sales Catholic Academy, and St. Peter Catholic Academy in Bensonhurst, Bath Beach. You can check out the winning masterpieces in next week's edition of the tablet. Can't wait to see that. And before we go, do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. That is this Currents News update. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.